Hello comrades, it's the Finnish Bolshevik. Lots of people have been talking about the recent turmoil in Poland, where the right-wing government has decided to impose new stricter restrictions on abortion and women's reproductive rights. However, something else that has also been going on simultaneously is the new intensification of the persecution of communists. Persecution of communists in Poland has been going on for years. It has been going on ever since the restoration of capitalism, but it has been intensifying in recent years, particularly since 2015, when the right-wing Law and Justice Party, or PIS, took power. The same guys who are predominantly responsible for this new law banning abortion. So in this video I'm gonna give a brief history of the persecution of communists in Poland and also the most recent developments in the continuous attempts to outlaw communism and arrest communists and ban the Communist Party. But first, I want to quote in full the position of the Communist Party of Poland on the so-called Constitutional Tribunal's decision to ban abortion. This statement is pretty short, and I think it is very good, so I'm gonna read it in full now. Quote, "The Communist Party of Poland condemns the judgment of the so-called Constitutional Tribunal regarding the prohibition of abortion in the event of severe damage to the fetus. We believe that this ruling party-controlled body, controlled by manipulation by PIS nominees, is trying to impose religious prohibitions on the whole society that are inconsistent with the current state of medical knowledge and contemporary ethics. It was not without reason that the decision in such a controversial case, postponed until the period after the elections, was taken by the tribunal during the escalation of the pandemic, when the organization of assemblies and protests was banned. Forcing women to give birth to terminally ill, deformed children unable to live independently and consciously is a crime. This will contribute to the tragedy of many women and entire families, especially those of the working class, the excluded and the poor. Currently, the Polish state does not provide adequate care even to people with a lesser degree of disability. Forcing to give birth to a being that is irrevocably sentenced to death is torture, prohibited by all civilized law. The decision to give birth to a disabled child should be made only by the woman and be the result of a conscious moral choice. Believers who are attached to the orders of the hierarchs of the Catholic Church have the right to do so. We stand for religious freedom for believers. However, the rules of religion cannot be imposed on society at large. The main driver of reactionary ideological changes in legislation is the Catholic Church. We believe that a real separation of church and state is necessary. Church hierarchs should be removed from political and public life. It is also necessary to adopt standards prohibiting the combination of state events with religious elements, prohibiting religious indoctrination in education and other spheres of life, and ending support for religious organizations from the state budget. The Communist Party of Poland supports protest against reactionary changes in the law. At the same time, we would like to remind you that this fight also has a class dimension. It will not be won by capitalist politicians who have proven more than once that they combine reactionary socio-economic views with submission to the Catholic Church and religious indoctrination. We express our appreciation to all organizations and people protesting against the totalitarian interference of the authorities in the life of society, and we call on everyone to participate in the protests." Unquote. I think the Communist Party of Poland is correct on this abortion issue. They have a very reasonable position on it. Now, let's get to the brief history of persecution of communists in Poland. The Communist Party of Poland was created in 2002 on the basis of the Union of Polish Communists, which had existed since 1990, when it was liquidated by the state authorities. The modern Communist Party of Poland was established on the basis of the previous communist movement, in opposition to the opportunist and technocratic line of the main left-wing party, Alliance of Democratic Left, which includes former leadership of the Polish United Workers' Party, which participated in bourgeois governments dismantling socialism and re-establishing of capitalism in Poland. On March 31st, 2016, the lower court of Dąbrowa Górnicza sentenced 4 members of the Communist Party of Poland to paying fines and 9 months of community service. The charges dealt with quote-unquote propaganda of the communist ideology on the party's website and their newspaper, Brzask. Poland's ruling Law and Justice Party demanded the banning of the Communist Party of Poland on the pretext that the party's program was supposedly unconstitutional and demanded the banning of their newspaper. On February 2018, the Polish government tried to implement a new law proposed by the ruling PiS party, which would have made it a crime to blame Polish fascists for the Holocaust. The law did not actually deny the Holocaust, but it said that Polish fascists were not to blame for it. Only fascists of other countries, such as Germany, could be blamed. So if somebody mentioned the Holocaust, you couldn't talk about Polish fascist collaborators or Polish fascists killing Jews. You couldn't talk about that. However, due to massive international criticism, this law was reversed. That same year, the Communist Party of Poland gave the following interview to Unsere Zeit, paper of the German Communist Party, regarding the continuing persecution of communists in Poland. Here are some excerpts from the interview. Quote, "Our situation at the moment is difficult. 3 members of the party, 2 of whom are editors of the party's paper, Brzask, are being charged with propaganda in favor of a totalitarian system. Our party is under threat of being outlawed. According to the media, the Minister of Justice has ordered the public prosecutor to collect evidence that the activity of the communists violates the constitution. In Poland, charges against communists are not a new phenomenon. In earlier years, there have been several attempts to ban our party. However, during the 2 years of the current right-wing government, the attempts have intensified. Anti-communism is part of the government's ideology, and its goal is the complete banning of communist activity. For example, the government has accepted laws to rename streets whose earlier names dealt with working-class history, and ordered the removal of anti-fascist monuments from public places. That decision received opposition from many local government organs, and also from many people who are not politically on the left. The Communist Party of Poland is for the time being a legally recognized political party and continues to operate by holding meetings, frequently publishing the Brzask newspaper, and continuing its activity on the internet. We are ready to face the persecutions." Unquote. On the 25th of May 2018, Sotirios Zarianopoulos, member of the European Parliament representing the Greek Communist Party, made the following statement to the EU Commission. Quote, "After banning communist symbols and prosecuting and putting on trial members of the rank and file of the Polish Communist Party for disseminating their ideas through the Brzask newspaper, measures which are still going on, the Polish authorities have initiated the prosecution of a professor who, on the 200th anniversary of the birth of Karl Marx, held a conference on Marxism at the University of Szczecin. This new prosecution is unacceptable. Brandishing a mandate from the public prosecutor, the police invaded the conference being held on the university's premises, seeking, as they claimed, evidence to substantiate the provocative charge of quote-unquote promoting totalitarianism. With this fresh act of persecution, the Polish government is continuing the anti-communist frenzy being whipped up by the EU and the governments of other countries, while pursuing attacks on workers' rights. In view of the above, can the Commission say, what view does it take of the provocative prosecutions and trials on trumped-up charges initiated by the Polish authorities, which, in effect, deny the Polish Communist Party the right to exchange ideas and engage in political expression and action?" Unquote. Naturally, this question was rhetorical. The EU is an instrument of the imperialist bourgeoisie and fully stands behind the anti-communist measures. The statement by the Greek Communist Party was merely meant to draw attention to the anti-communist persecution and expose the EU Commission as the reactionaries that they are. In 2018 and 2019, demonstrations were held in front of Polish embassies in the UK, Russia, Finland, Greece, Belgium, Spain, the United States and other countries to protest the anti-communist persecutions. Other Polish leftists, including Social Democrats and Trotskyists, joined in solidarity with the Communist Party of Poland to support them against the government. In early 2019, the Dąbrowa Górnicza Regional Court gave the communists a verdict of not guilty. The Communist Party of Poland made the following statement to fellow communists who had supported them through the anti-communist persecution. Quote, "Dear comrades, on 18th of January, the Regional Court of Dąbrowa-Górnicza released the Communist Party of Poland's paper Brzask and the party's website of the accusation of quote-unquote advocating totalitarianism. This persecution is part of an anti-communist campaign launched by the state, aimed at outlawing the Communist Party of Poland. The trial began 3 years ago, after the Law and Justice Party, PIS, gained power and one of their parliamentary deputies made accusations against the Communist Party of Poland, demanding it to be outlawed. At the end of 2015, the 3-member editorial board of Brzask and the administrator of the website were prosecuted. When the court case began, the prosecutor was under the authority and political supervision of the PIS party, and attacks against the court's objectivity began. In its ruling, the court stated that the accusation was too general and loose, and was only based on a small number of articles and sentences taken out of their proper context. The evidence presented did not demonstrate that any crime had taken place. The ruling also stated that advocating communism is not the same as advocating a totalitarian system. This ruling is a great victory for our party, but the battle is far from over. We must be prepared in order to repel the next attacks. The Communist Party of Poland gives its thanks to all the comrades and parties that gave their solidarity to our party and took part in preventing its outlawing." Unquote. It was understood that this was only the regional court, and of course the persecution and court cases would continue. This was again only a temporary defensive victory of the Polish working class. On March 17, 2020, the district court in Dąbrowa-Górnicza, without the defendants being present due to the coronavirus, discontinued the court proceedings, however ordering the defendants to pay part of the trial costs and ordered each of the accused to pay 1,000 PLN to the so-called Victims Assistance Fund. The communists who were accused were not convicted, but they were still ordered to pay fines, which is strange. I'm not a lawyer, but I didn't know that it was possible to do that. You would think that if they were not convicted, then they wouldn't be forced into paying anything, but I don't know. However, this decision was not final, because the communists appealed this decision, and of course, the government would also not be satisfied with this. The communists do not advocate for totalitarianism and haven't broken any laws, so of course, the reactionaries want to change the laws to simply banning communism outright and saying that regardless if you advocate totalitarianism or whatever that even means to them, it's simply illegal to even be a communist. The most recent development in these lawsuits against the Communist Party and their newspaper was when the Katowice court on October 13th, 2020 denied the Communist Party's appeal and ordered the editors of the Brzask newspaper to pay fines, despite not being convicted of anything, and also ordered them to stop all of their supposedly totalitarian political activities. If they continue their political activities, the case can be reopened. So, a working class perspective, writing a working class newspaper, is criminalized as supposedly totalitarian, yet when the right-wing capitalist government carries out this kind of witch hunt against these communists, somehow that's not totalitarian. For now, the Communist Party is still allowed to exist legally, but it is certain that the reactionaries will not give up this easily. The PIS party has already taken steps to change the laws, and to further secure their control of the courts, so that they can force the kinds of decisions that they want. And are the communists simply supposed to stop being communists because the court has now ordered them to do so? The only result that we can realistically expect is that the communists will continue trying to fight for the rights of the workers, and the capitalist government will continue to try and stop them.